Alrighty, so this module is sensory processing disorders, and you might find that this sounds very similar to what you might have learned in your ADHD module. So, and there are sensory processing disorder might be one of those overlaid conditions that overlays ADHD or attention hyperactivity disorder. So, for the typically developing human, the typical sensory processing system facilitates an individual's effective participation and engagement in purposeful and meaningful occupations. So, with all of that to say, each area of occupation for somebody with a sensory processing disorder has the potential to be significantly compromised when one's ability to process sensory information and produce a subsequent adaptive response is impacted by atypical sensory processing. So, all areas of occupation will be impacted. And starting with play is a complex concept with varying degrees of ability to engage. So when we think about the impact on occupational performance with basic ADLs, individuals with SPD can find the multisensory components of bathing, showering, dressing, eating, feeding, personal hygiene, grooming, and toileting significantly challenging. So, for example, if there are visual, tactile, proprioceptive, olfactory, auditory, gustatory sensations, impairments, these can create a severe food selectivity issue due to the varying color, texture, smell, and taste of the food. Our kiddos who have sensitivity to clothing fabric, seams, and tags can result in clothing choices that are restrictive or seemingly inappropriate for the weather. I think a lot of us can appreciate when that little tag in the back of your shirt or the seam of your sock, or there's a little wrinkle in your clothing, or it's too tight or it's too loose, and it just really disturbs your whole day or your whole moment, and your focus just solely becomes on that. Just going back to food real quick as an example, I know there are many of us who have an aversion to anything quote unquote slimy. I know some people don't like peaches for the furriness on the outside, or a crunchiness, or avocados because they're slimy. So with our typical adaptive responses, we're either able to not eat the food or take it off our plate, or we're able to adjust our clothing. But for somebody with a sensory processing disorder, they're not able to sort of move away from the reaction to those stimuli, and that then there causes a breakdown in their ability, their executive functioning, and their ability to plan, communicate, adapt their behaviors. And that's where we see some more of those outbursts with clients such as those with SPD. So again, going back to clothing, the children who have challenges sequencing and organizing their bodies in space to correctly orient clothing to their body, don clothing, manipulate fasteners, or tie shoes, they have a really hard time with being able to dress on their own. Bathing can also cause discomfort and stress for children with sensory processing disorders who have a sympathetic nervous system response, that flight, fright, fight, in response to the sensory input of the sound of water from the faucet, putting their head upside down to maybe wash the soap out of their hair, the texture of the washcloth, maybe the slimy feel of soap and the shampoo, and they might have a sensory temperature sensitivity. So you can see how just basic ADLs can be such a challenge for a child with sensory processing disorder, or an adult with sensory processing disorder, if they've not been able to adapt and find adaptive responses. And this can be also very impactful on the family unit. If the child is not able to eat certain foods, the family maybe isn't able to go out to dinner or go participate in social gatherings. If this can be because the behaviors can be very disruptive. It could take a long time to get out of the house because a caregiver has to facilitate dressing because of a decreased ability to organize clothing or even bathe themselves. So hygiene might be impacted. And if you think about IADLs, going back to what we talked about with attention deficit ADHD, just those higher level cognitive skills required to engage in IADLs, as well as the sensory components that go into IADLs, washing dishes, folding laundry, the different textures, the feel of the paper during bill paying or reading a book. So this can all be very, very challenging for the person with SPD. So if we go to the occupation of health management, individuals diagnosed with SPD can potentially experience a myriad of difficulties with health management activities, including processing and understanding healthcare information in order to make informed decisions about their healthcare. Medication management might be challenging, coordinating and keeping up with health care appointments, and general caregiving activities. Again, sleep and rest, the occupation of sleep and rest can be impacted. Individuals with SPD can experience difficulty with all aspects of sleep, including falling asleep, sustaining uninterrupted sleep, having good quality sleep. There might be sensitivities to auditory background sounds. Maybe the humming of the electronics in the room could be very distracting. The fabric and texture of the bedding or night clothes could be distracting. Moonlight shining in the room. So this could result in an inability to get to or resume sleeping. Alternatively, the child who tends to crave sensory input, they might have difficulty settling down due to the need for extra bedding to provide, enough sensory input to facilitate their ability to sleep. Children with SPD who become overstimulated in the evening may have trouble regulating their nervous system in order to fall asleep. And I think some of you might recognize this in yourself, that need to have something heavy on you to help kind of calm and soothe yourself. And that's an adaptive response to maybe some quote unquote glitch in our sensory processing system. But because we have those adaptive responses, we're able to understand and make those modifications kind of almost innately. Education and work can be really, really hard for these clients. That has a significant impact on their ability to effectively engage in school. There's a lot of factors that are impacting school readiness, school performance, and ultimately academic success. If you just think about all the sensory input that happens in your everyday at school, and then you put that into a little person who has a decreased ability to modify and adapt their behaviors, and school becomes really, really hard. Work can become really, really hard. It can impact their ability to make a job choice, and it can affect job performance. There can be an avoidance of occupations or lack of participation in jobs, and this could be as a way of coping. And then I feel like social participation is just going to be an area that's highly impacted. Children begin developing social skills within infancy. Babies make eye contact, they extend their arms, they mold their body to their caregivers. The ability to process the sensory information accurately underlies these behaviors. So if a child has an impairment in those areas and they're not cuddling and they're not reaching, so all of those sort of intimacy and behavior developments starts to be impacted at a very, very young age. So sensory processing disorder, again, is another condition that underlies many, many other conditions. And then you overlay a stroke or a brain injury, a spinal cord injury, multiple sclerosis on top of that. And there's a lot of things to work with and to manage and to really help identify to effectively work with that client. So, as always, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out.